My name is Andrea Simmons, and this is my research design memo. I briefly want to talk about my positionality to this work. First of all, I am a Black woman who was born in Mississippi. In my experience, I've negotiated both gender stereotypes, racial stereotypes, um, and so when I think about the experiences that I have had and the things that I have seen as a Black woman in my community and in the schools that I work in, this is very personal to me. Personally, in my instruction, I've always used technology from the very first year I began teaching. I do believe that it is a core part of the way that I deliver instruction to students. And I do believe that in the hands of a skilled teacher, technology has the potential to support transformative learning experiences for students. So as I began focusing on this work, I began to review the literature. I started with reviewing the literature about Black girls, and what I found is that they are simultaneously visible and invisible in our mathematics classrooms. As far as visibility, Black girls face adultification, spirit murder, harsh punishment, and exclusionary discipline. And they're often measured against a standard of white femininity. Um, and so, seemingly normal behaviors are often um, perceived as malicious, and therefore they are the recipients of exclusionary discipline that pushes them out of the classroom. Despite being only 8% of the population of students in K-12 schools, they are suspended at a rate that's 6 times greater than that of white students, and often they are the targets of social correction. They have to deal with the dominant narratives about Black women that hypersexualize them and depict them as intellectually competent, aggressive, and loud people. And Morris talked about in her book that simple behaviors such as falling asleep, standing up for themselves, wearing their hair, asking questions, advocating for themselves, and even though they were engaging in unruly behavior that were not delinquent or criminal, these resulted in them being pushed out of school. As far as being invisible, Black girls are often overlooked by their teachers. They're excluded from the traditional curriculum. They are misaligned. Uh, the teaching practices that they receive are misaligned with their actual needs. They're underrepresented in STEM, not because of their ability, but just because many times the school environment limits their access to advanced opportunities. And their performance is often hidden in aggregate data on um, their achievement. According to the American Association of University Women, Black girls have less interaction with their teachers than white girls, but they attempt to interact more. They initiate the interaction more often than white girls or boys of either race. Some Black girls perceive this lack of interaction and support as a challenge to work harder, but we know that there are some students that it doesn't have that same effect for. And the traditional curriculum has centered white males to the exclusion of Black people and women. And so our Black girls are multiply marginalized. So, what this results in is an environment that is dehumanizing. And so, there are a variety of different scholars who have put forth liberatory efforts to reclaim the fate and the future of Black girls. And for some of the ones that I reviewed, I've grouped them into categories. One category is humanization and socialization, and it just talks about delivering a more humanizing pedagogy for students and focusing on the classroom environment, the school environment, as a way to counteract the negative effects that students have um, been the recipients of. Another big category was counter spaces, and there were several authors who talked about alternative spaces that were either like after school clubs, camps, um, even like affinity groups that they could take part in that would give them access to different things and they would be getting access to in the classroom. And then another one that I saw was technology and digital literacies. And so there were some studies where the students use digital media for the purpose of criticality and communicating and making arguments, but these took place in the ELA classroom. And when I read an article by Goldie Muhammad, she talked about black girl literacies. I think there were 9 different ones. And so one of them was digital literacies. And she said that this particular phenomenon was understudied for black girls. So when I put all that together, what I see is a research gap where the efforts to um, deliver a liberatory, humanizing pedagogy often happens in counter spaces, not in the actual classroom. And as we have increased the use of technology over the past decade, we have not studied how this technology impacts students. And what I noticed is when I tried to look for technology as it relates to um, culture and technology as it relates to mathematics instruction, there was a 10-year gap where in studies that focused on students' engagement with technology and mathematics. And as I stated before, the studies that talked about leveraging technology for criticality development occurred in ELA classrooms. And so while the studies that I have seen were studies that regard improving educational outcomes for black girls, it is developing and growing. Very little connects culturally informed mathematics instruction with technology. So my research project is called From Substitution to Redefinition, a practitioner inquiry on transforming black girls' experiences in mathematics through instructional technology coaching. And what I am aiming to do is to counteract dehumanization and the lack of transformational learning experiences with technology enhanced and culturally responsive mathematics instruction. So what I'm looking at is combining culturally responsive teaching, which specifically culturally and historically responsive teaching, which is developed by Goldie Muhammad, and she talks about 5 pursuits that help students to have a balanced curriculum. And those pursuits are identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. And for the technology component, we are looking at combining TPAC along with SAMR. So TPAC is the technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge model. And what it does is it combines knowledge of technology with knowledge of your content along with knowledge of how to deliver instruction. So all of these things work together to effectively use technology in the classroom. Along with TPAC, we often use the SAMR model, which stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And these are not necessarily a ladder the way that is depicted in this image, but it talks about the extent to which technology is used. So being a direct substitute up to helping to redefine the way the content is being not just delivered, but being reproduced by students or recreated or redesigned. And finally, I am also looking at the Gym Night coaching model, which I'll be using to um, plan my interactions with the teacher participants. And so the way that I'm seeing all of this come together is that transformative teacher praxis should lead to transformative student experience. And the way that I see these things working together, the culturally informed instruction, and if you can see around the little cogwheel here, you will see the five pursuits: identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. But I'm also adding on here assets, because the whole purpose of this is to shift our perspective to focus on highlighting students' assets and not what they are considered to be deficient in. Also, we have the SAMR and TPAC combined, and within that, we're trying to develop the four C's within students, which are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And finally, efficacy. Not just individual self efficacy, but also teacher efficacy and our collective efficacy as educators, my efficacy as a coach, and our collective efficacy in knowing that we have the power to positively influence student performance and student understanding through our efforts. And so all of these things working together create a humanizing asset based pedagogy, which we hope will lead to engagement and positive mathematics disposition. And the arrows here are going different ways because I do believe that engagement does lead to positive math disposition, but I also believe that if you have a positive math disposition, it can lead to further engagement. And so it is a cycle that continues. And understanding that all of these things that I'm looking at are taking place in a social environment. And so they're mediated by not only the instruction that is taking place, but the peer relations, the relations between teacher and student. And so my research question um, is, how does a professional development session followed by a sustained instructional coaching influence mathematics teachers' implementation of a culturally and technologically infused approach to math instruction? And I'm still working on this question because my chair said that I need to um, be more. She says that the way that I had my question worded before was not an action research. So if I really wanted to stick to action research, then I needed to change it. So this is my way of changing it. It may change again. And I'm really teetering at this point between doing a case study versus action research. But as of today, I have decided that my setting is going to be one of two high schools that I am assigned to as a digital learning specialist. So what I am trying to see is, in my practice as a culturally responsive technology coach, how does the work that I do influence the actions of teachers to shift their practices for the benefit of Black girls, which ultimately will benefit all students? So, what I'm looking for is gathering a target number of 3 to 5 participants, and I want them to teach algebra. Um, these qualifications may change because I do have at least 1 year of successful teaching experience, but I don't want to discredit and discount the participation of someone who is a newer teacher who just wants to jump in and try a new approach. Um, and of course, they have to express a willingness to learn about, implement, and share their experience with the approach. Um, if I cannot achieve those 3 to 5 by, um, you know, communicating with them and the departments within the school, then I will try to use a snowball method to get the target number. So I am open to expanding it to schools that I don't work with directly, and that coaching will have to be modified to be online. The ethical and political considerations that I must think about is, of course, I'll have to obtain my informed consent, maintain participant confidentiality. And in this case, I do think developing trust and rapport is important. And just being aware of my reflexivity and my subjectivities, um, and how they could bias my thoughts and opinions about things. So making sure that I am aware of um, my personal leanings towards technology and my personal leanings towards certain ways of doing things, and being open and flexible to allow my participants to share power. Like there's no power, but to make sure that they know that I am looking to them as valuable resources and not trying to enact my way upon them. Um, I understand that I could be potentially blinded by my own experiences, my own affinity for technology. And that quote, a way of seeing is also a way of not seeing. So, my strong leanings towards one thing or the other can cloud my view and judgment of other possibilities. I know that I have to maintain or seek out voluntary participation, that no one is feeling coerced to participate or forced. And I really have to make sure that I um, address the unspoken dynamics of power that some teachers may have in thinking that I as a coach have power over them. My role is not punitive. I don't report back to my principal on anything that I notice. And so them really understanding that our work together is our work together. And something that I think about, like on the social political level, is there may be some reluctance to focus on a study that basically at its core is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that that is under attack in this moment, and also even just a gender related study, because some people could argue that why just girls? Why not just black children? And so those are some things to keep in mind, and keep in mind, that the people who are sharing in this group are to some extent vulnerable in giving their opinions. My data sources and collection. So I do want to do a pre and post cycle um, semi-structured interview. I also want to do a pre and post questionnaire, because part of this is obtaining information about what the teachers already know in terms of the technology tools and how to use them. So I want to get a baseline of that, and that's part of my coaching process anyway, is to get a baseline of what they do know how to do, and look at the end of the cycle, what has changed. I also want to, maintain field notes. So that would be a form of participant observation. My documentation of the coaching cycle, which includes goal setting, implementation, coaching encounters, which are, basically short meetings where I provide one-on-one support, and just the outcomes of the cycle. Um, I do want to get reflections on their practice. I think I want to stick with a weekly reflection, just because I think it's good to kind of maintain um, a reflective stance for the participants, but also it provides good data about growth over time. And I do want to get reflections on student artifacts. So what are they seeing in the girls' work, particularly because this is probably going to occur in the spring? Like, is there anything that they notice in the girls that they did not see before this implementation, or is there anything they noticed that stood out to them in their work? And then finally, analyze the data. So I do want to develop an initial code book to look for evidence of, I'm looking for self-efficacy, collective teacher efficacy, applications of SAMR and applications of the SAMR and TPAC model as evidence through those 4 C's: communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. um, and evidence of those 5 pursuits. So I know that's a lot of things to be looking for, but I'm looking for evidence that these things are happening in practice as they are um, beginning and throughout. Um, I also want to use inductive coding for the interviews, and I really haven't figured this all the way out yet because I've read some things, but I haven't really processed because parts of this study is kind of evolving, has been evolving in recent weeks in meeting with my chair. And so we are kind of fleshing some things out, which will make this part a lot more clear for me. And finally, establishing credibility and trustworthiness. I know that I have to really describe my research process and make my practices transparent. Um, and it has to be grounded in the work that others have done in practitioner inquiry. So I'm really trying to get a good base of authors. I do have one good source that I've been reviewing, and I'm also reviewing some other articles in the coming weeks. I know I have to make my positionality and identity clear and how I'm viewing the work in the study. And I'm also realized that in order for this to be credible, one is I have to spend time in the research setting with the participants as long as possible to make sure that I have engaged and gotten enough information to um, make the knowledge claims that I will be putting forth and member checks. And one of the sources that I read that I really liked was called Beyond Member Checking, and that was um, focused on not just providing the transcripts at the end of the study, but really checking in with participants throughout the process to make sure that their words are being carefully thought out and that they were able to provide input on everything. I really need to reflect on how I can do that, but also maintain, you know, the purity of the coaching cycle. But I do like that for member checking, like checking throughout versus checking at the end. And I do know that I need to maintain detailed field notes. So this is pretty much the where I am right now. I know I have a lot of work to do, so I am putting together a plan for the fall semester so that I can move forward with my work.